There's a fundamental rule in history. Empires fall. Think about it. The Romans, the Ottomans, the British. They have their moment and then they collapse, and they don't come back. But there is one massive, glaring exception. A civilization that has utterly collapsed, not just once, but over and over again, and yet it always rises from the ashes. Of course, we're talking about China. I mean, just look at this comparison. It's staggering. The Roman Empire, the foundation of Western civilization, collapsed one time. And that was it. Game over. It fractured into the nations we see today. But Chinese civilization, it's a completely different story. We're talking at least 8 major collapses, periods of total chaos, warlords, famine, invasion, and every single time it has been put back together again. So you have to ask, right? How is that possible? What's its secret? So yeah, how does this impossible comeback keep happening? That's the big puzzle we're tackling first. We're going to pull back the curtain and look at the hidden machinery behind this incredible story of collapse and rebirth, a cycle that's been repeating for literally thousands of years. And this quote right here, it just nails the core idea. Think about it like this. When the Chinese state shatters, it's not like the hard drive gets wiped clean. Not at all. The hardware, the armies, the palaces, the emperor, that all gets destroyed. But the software, the cultural operating system, the very idea of what China is, that's saved. It's always there, just waiting to be reinstalled on new hardware. Okay, so if the software is saved, how is it saved? What's the backup drive? Well, the answer seems to lie in what you could call a civilizational immune system. It's this incredible code built on 3 core pillars that keeps the concept of China alive even when the actual state has completely ceased to exist. And here they are, the big 3. These are the pillars we're about to break down. First, a shared written language. Second, a unique political ideology called the Mandate of Heaven. And third, a permanent class of professional administrators. You can think of them like a tripod, incredibly stable, and it's what has held the whole structure up through every imaginable storm. First up, the writing, and this is a huge deal. Imagine this. A scholar in the north and a merchant in the south might speak languages so different they literally couldn't have a conversation. But they could read the exact same books, the same poems, the same government documents. They could write to each other perfectly. Now, when Rome fell, their common language Latin shattered into French, Spanish, Italian. But in China, the written script held strong. It was like the shared instruction manual for how to build a unified state, and it never got lost. All right, pillar number 2, the Mandate of Heaven. And this is just a stroke of political genius. The basic idea is the emperor rules because heaven allows it. But, and here's the crucial twist, if things go wrong, like massive floods, famines, or rebellions, it's seen as a sign that heaven has withdrawn its support. So what does that do? It creates a permanent justification for a new leader to rise up and say, hey, the old dynasty lost the mandate and I'm here to reclaim it. But to be seen as legitimate, you couldn't just rule a piece of China. You had to unify the whole thing. It created this constant, powerful magnetic pull toward reunification. And that brings us to the third pillar, the people who actually ran the government. For over a millennium, China wasn't run by nobles born into power. It was run by a meritocracy of scholar-bureaucrats. To get a government job, you had to pass these legendarily difficult civil service exams on history, philosophy, and literature. So, when a dynasty collapsed, this whole class of professional managers didn't just disappear. They were the living hard drive. They held the blueprints for how to run a massive empire, just waiting for the next person to unify the country and hire them to do it all over again. Okay, so you've got the writing, the ideology, and the administrators. That's the system. But the real aha moment comes when you see what other empires were missing. Let's really put this theory to the test and ask that simple question. Why didn't Rome come back? And this table just lays it out so clearly. After Rome fell, was there some powerful idea that Europe had to be reunited? No. Local kings and princes were perfectly fine with their own separate kingdoms. Their common language, Latin, it fractured into different languages. Their administrative class, it was replaced by a patchwork of local warlords and feudal nobles. On all 3 counts, China had the exact opposite. The system wasn't just resilient, it felt like it was designed for a comeback. And get this, the system was so powerful, it even absorbed its own conquerors. When the Mongols on horseback stormed across Asia and took China in the 1200s, you'd think they'd change everything. But they didn't. Within a couple of generations, their rulers were acting like Chinese emperors, using the same bureaucracy. The same thing happened with the Manchus in the 1600s. The civilizational code was so strong, it basically digested its invaders and turned them into its newest operators. Now, let's not make the mistake of thinking this is all just ancient history. This cycle of collapse and reset kept on turning, and its most recent iteration was maybe the most violent and dramatic of them all. From the mid-1800s to 1949, China experienced what it now calls the Century of Humiliation. We're talking foreign invasions, a civil war that killed tens of millions of people, the total collapse of the 2,000-year-old imperial system, and then another brutal invasion. By any normal historical logic, China should have broken apart permanently, but the pattern held. So when the Communist Party finally unified the country in 1949, how did they do it? This is what's so fascinating. They didn't really invent a totally new system. They just installed new software on the old operating system. The mandate of heaven was replaced by the idea of party legitimacy. To get ahead, you no longer studied Confucian classics, you studied Marxist theory. The scholar officers became the party cadres. The structure was eerily similar. And even after that, the cycle turned again. Following the immense chaos of the Mao years, Deng Xiaoping effectively hit another reset button, this time an economic one. And the renewal phase that followed was just breathtaking. I mean, look at this number. 800 million. That's how many people were lifted out of absolute poverty. It shows the incredible power this system has when it kicks into that rebuilding phase. Which, of course, brings us to right now. This historical pattern has held strong through the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and the Industrial Age. But the really big question is, can it survive the Information Age? Can it survive the 21st century? And honestly, nobody knows. Because the challenges today are fundamentally different. They're things the system has never, ever had to deal with before. A population that's actually aging and shrinking. An environmental crisis on a scale that's hard to comprehend. And of course, the global internet, which challenges the very idea of centralized information control. These are variables the old historical pattern just has no data for. And this leads us to the great modern paradox. The very strengths that made China so resilient could now be its greatest weaknesses. That powerful centralization? Fantastic when information moved at the speed of a horse. But today, one bad decision at the top can cascade into a nationwide crisis in hours. That deep cultural unity, much easier to maintain before the internet could show everyone millions of other ways to live. It's a total reversal. And make no mistake, the government today is operating with this cyclical history in mind. The official state goal is national rejuvenation by the year 2049. That's not a random date. It's the 100th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic. It is the explicitly stated endpoint for this current renewal phase. They are consciously trying to complete the historical cycle. So where does all this leave us? The ultimate lesson here is that resilience isn't about never falling down. It's about having a system to get back up. And China has the most practiced, most robust system for getting back up that the world has ever known. But that ancient system is now facing a set of challenges it was never designed for. And the question that will define this century is whether we're just watching another turn of the wheel, or if the empire that never dies is finally facing the one thing it can't reset from: modernity itself.